So that means it's good. We're good to go. We're good to go. Great. Welcome, everyone. It's been a while since we've met, so we'll try and catch up and move through this agenda. So the first thing I'd like to do is someone to approve the agenda as Steph very graciously put together for us and put out. Is there anything that people would like to add to it or move around or change?
We had one supporting document that was sent via email. Actually, it's not supporting. It would be 7.3 potential draft job description for the HARS.
Yes, thank you, Jamie, for that.
That would be
right. So we can just add that in and we'll take a look at it.
okay.
Any other additions, alterations? It all looks good. So Judy's moving, Fraser seconding to accept the agenda as amended. Minutes from the January 16th meeting. It was a while ago. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at what was reported from those minutes? They were at the bottom underneath the agenda that Steph sent out. I had a chance to look at it. Thank you, Steph. They're always so well put together. Anything that did anybody catch anybody's eye that was either omissions or things that need to be changed? I entertain a motion to accept the minutes. I think it was Fraser first and then Judy second. So they're definitely here in this meeting. Great. Objections? Past that. Okay. Public comments. We don't have that, right? Action items to review. Steph, is there any things that we want that were the action items from that? From the minutes.
Most of the action items will be covered
Are
up
covered in the
in
agenda.
the subcommittee reports. Yeah, so we'll do the mission and core values, principles and rates, management model. And then there was an ongoing action regarding the endowment
Right.
grant payment. Jamie?
Yeah, so kind of doing a little bit of
We
research.
discussed it and it's good.
Good. So
Oh, I thought it was gonna say what were the
Yeah.
funds gonna go to?
there was what were the restrictions are on it
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. To the hire,
to the hire.
the artistic director.
Oh, to the, like the job description that.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, good. That'll probably come up for further discussion when we get into the job description and stuff like that. And also, I think that we're going to be covering that within the agenda items. So if it's okay with you, Steph, I'd just like to move towards the updates. Liam, are you actually ready to give us an update on the community center construction timeline? Like that's been put near the top. So I'm going to turn it over to you if you're okay with that. Like, why do I look weird?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. I'll look at him over here.
It is funny with the camera
I got
screen set up in there. Unfortunately, we're still looking at tarps on the roof, but that is for good reason. The constructor's trying to get 100% confirmation from the warranty provider of the roof that the materials will be covered, have a full warranty before putting the roofing material on. And so everything looks good from an inspection perspective, but they want to get that certainty from the warranty provider. And I'm told that a lot of the metal roofing has already been formed on site and that it's ready to go. And so they're just waiting for that green light. Inside the building is getting pretty exciting though. There's a lot of finishes going on or being completed. And I was told by Lee, who was there most recently out of our team, that there's also starting to install some of the AV equipment too. And so we're starting to see the rooms really take shape. And so it's really exciting in the space. You can start to really feel how it will operate and get a sense of what each of the rooms are like. In terms of construction schedule, we did just get an update from the constructor who has pushed the timeline back yet again. And so haven't had a chance to meet with them to discuss that in any detail. We're doing that tomorrow, and we'll hopefully have a better understanding of what those implications are. But really what it's looking like is that we may be achieving occupancy at some point in the summer. And so we're
Seasonal, okay.
seasonal, yeah. So
Or the moon lines up with it.
yeah, so essentially, what that means though for us in terms of moving into the space and beginning to program and operate the space is that it may be that we're not going to be really programming much in the summer, but the focus will be on the fall. So again, it's a little soon to talk details because we don't understand all of the details in the schedule yet, but we're gonna probably be looking at more of a fall launch for programming, things like that. So
Right, great. Thanks, Liam. Judy, you have a question?
What specifically was the date that they gave you in terms of pushing it out?
July 19th as the handover date.
Then there would be another 2 weeks or so to double check deficiencies, and then we would take occupancy.
No, handover happens after deficiencies and occupancy, so that's so that would be when we would be basically moving in. But then it's at least 2 to 3 week window of occupying the space, getting to understand the space in terms of how we can manage the space before we're actually opening the doors to the public to start programming.
So they're now thinking that occupancy will be July the 19th, and that's after all the deficiencies that would be like the drop dead ends line, and all the deficiencies, if any, would be taken care of?
Occupancy would be probably before handover. So occupancy is basically a term that says the building is ready to be occupied. But handover is when we actually become responsible for the building and we're liable for everything on site. And that right now, that's their site. Handover is when they turn the site back to us. That's the key important date for us. So
what is July the 19th?
The handover date. That's the date in which we take full responsibility for the site, as it is in their schedule right now, right? And that's subject to change. But with certainty, the majority of the deficiencies will be identified and hopefully resolved before handover occurs. But there would definitely be deficiencies even after we take handover and even after we're in the space. It's likely that deficiencies will be hanging on for quite some time, but they won't be problematic. They won't be impacting programs. They won't be impacting us using the space. But it's like our fire hall, which was completed almost, geez, it's coming up on 2 years perhaps. And there's still some deficiencies in there that are left to be resolved.
Thanks, Liam. I just have a question. Do you have a sense of when you're going to be implementing what I would call a critical timeline, where you're actually planning for things that are going to be happening in the space? Because I'm sure you have a contingency for things that may have, like 6-8 months ago, that might have been in there, but since it's not ready, they're going to be happening elsewhere in terms of planning. And I'm just wondering if you, I guess looking at you, Jillian, too, because it's recreation, like how are you handling that kind of planning? Are you going like by Christmas for sure, we'll having activity in there and working backwards? Or is it still in flux, and are you working on a contingency plan?
It's basically been like a bit in flux and amend our own plan as it goes. We were lucky, like the majority of our recreation programming happens out of the fitness room in the basement of the children's center. And we were lucky to have the children's center folks be accommodating with us moving to a month-to-month schedule to let us stay
Right.
there as long as possible. But they themselves have their own needs, and so we're not able to continue on in that space beyond the end of April. And so that is a really big impact to our programs, and to the community. But we've been grateful for the amount of time that we have had with the Children's Center. But unfortunately, we don't have any great stopgap measure between having to vacate that space and being able to use the new space. And so we're in this really awkward and difficult position where we're going to have programs suspended for a period of time. And I'll be honest, it's frustrating because we don't even know what that exact period of time is. And so
Gotcha.
I
Yeah.
mean, I myself enjoy some of those fitness programs in that space, and that those programs will be put on hold. Originally, we were anticipating it would be about a 2-month window. Now we're realizing that it's going to be longer than that.
Right.
And so there's a real concern to impacting the instructors who make a living by providing those courses, and to the clients that benefit from those courses. And, you know, that's a real impact to our reputation, and the recovery from that can be hard the longer we go. And so if anybody knows of a really good space that, you know, with legal and that we can, you know, have insured, we may be looking at that. But it's also a lot of work for Jillian and her team to wind down programming in one space to spin that up in another, and then have to wind that down again. And so that would be multiple moves. And so up until this point, we had been thinking that we would essentially wind down those programs in a temporary fashion and spin it all up once the new center is open. But as we get more clarity about the actual occupancy time and the handover date, you know, we may really want to be looking at alternative spaces to run programming, because for a 4-month gap of programming is a really big hit to the community.
Right. Yeah, and just one last question is, have you guys been working on a communication strategy at all on this? Or just so what I'm trying to do is see if there's anything we need to be in alignment with. Do you know a communication strategy to the public at large about where things are at, or that there's going to be these delays?
In terms of the communications around the programming, that Jillian and her team have been doing a good job with that. But in terms of new programming in the space, we haven't been communicating at all to the community about, like, hey, we're excited to open the doors on September 15th or anything like that. So we've not communicated any kind of launch and opening for new programming of the space, because it's just been too uncertain. And I'll be honest, I don't feel confident yet to nail that down. And so I don't, I feel pretty confident that we'll be in there this fall, but I do not want to be quoted as saying that with.
Gotcha. Good. Thanks, Liam. Any other questions for Liam? Good. Thank you for that report. I think it's very, very helpful to know what we have to align with. And we don't have a set date from when we have to start thinking about what we need to align with, right? And so one last one, which I know the answer is you don't know, is if you had to just make a guess about when you might know when you would be starting to make that planning, not that when the planning is in place. Just again, I'm trying to help us align with that. Like if you said it was going to be starting in May, you might know, then we would go, okay, we need to be thinking about that in May, we should be like meeting and aligning with what you know.
Right. Well, I've got two responses to that, and one is I don't know. Wasn't expecting. But I think that as we we'll gain more certainty and clarity as we continue to move forward. And so I would imagine that by this time in May, that we'll have a much better sense and perhaps certainty on when we should be moving in and operating the space. But having said that as well, I think that there's been some work on trying to identify what are the core policies that need to be in place and or other operating procedures or work that needs to be done so that we are ready when the time comes. And so that this group can focus in on those core elements. And so that we know that when we open the doors, we feel confident that we've got the right things in place for the public to be in that space.
Right.
And because there's a lot of work that can be done to benefit the community while the space is already being occupied. But there's some of it that really needs to be done in advance.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always said, Liam, is the fact that it got delayed was always good for me.
You're right, right.
Good for the committee to get organized, right?
Right,
So,
right.
so we're not like,
There's a silver lining everywhere.
there is. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Liam. Anyone else have anything? And then, yes,
So we
Jamie.
don't actually have like a document of a timeline of things like Liam says, this is drop dead, it has to be done.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to hint at is it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because, and I understand from Liam, I don't speak for you, Liam, but the danger of actually creating a document like that is it creates a lot of tension because you're behind, right? And then it's hurry up and wait, and then the planning falls apart. So that's why I was trying to figure out what the window of the turnaround time is from the time that that construction, they kind of know what they're going to be on schedule. Then you start your planning because you know that you're going to be able to hit that mark, right?
And
So-
Lee and Jillian and I did do some work because I do what it's called backcasting. And so you kind of look forward to the date in which you are hoping to have achieved something and then backcast all of the necessary milestones that you have to achieve to get there. And so we did that with the idea of like a July operating within the space. And so and Lee put that together in a nice table that sort of identifies, well, here's the key steps. And it is a bit concerning, like you said, when you start to back it up and look at all of the steps required to get to approval of some of these policies that this group is working on, it feels like, oh my gosh, we need to be wrapping that up really soon to get it all the way through this committee, then through council.
Right.
So.
As a good segue for that, thank you, Liam. It does take us into our mission and core values committee, which we've been working on. And just to kind of echo what Liam said is that we've done some work on that. And I think where we are with that, Judy, we've been getting down into the kind of the wordsmithing thing. But what I think is it needs to be kind of moved into the larger group of documents, of policy documents, and added to it. And I'm not sure whether it means expanding that committee to include looking at the policy documents we're going to get into later. Like, and we now need to open up our scope and look at the larger group of documents that are needed rather than just focusing in on, this core value document, although it was important. So Judy, has there been any change to that document since we met last?
Yes. So I think the last time it was circulated with the group was version 6. And by my count, I've had major computer problems, but I got this computer back and it happened to have version 8 on it.
Right.
And I played with that, so I'm up to a version 9, but it wasn't in time to get everything out for this agenda. So I got this.
Well, maybe what we could do is.
Screen.
Maybe what I suggest, just for the sake of time, is that we circulate version 9. so everyone gets a chance to look at it. And I recommend that we include it because what we're going to get to under new business is the introduction of policy documents, a larger set of documents, a larger group of documents that needs to be worked on and put in place that are critical. And that I think the mission and core value document is going to be part of that, right? It's going to be a suite of documents. So we want to move away from like meeting separately about that one, put them in a large group and figure out how we review them and what process they go through. So if that's okay, the action should be that Judy, if you could share that document with Steph so that it could be shared to everyone on the committee.
Yeah, and I'm even gonna say, you can go CCJMC at,
Oh, just give it directly. Cut out the middle person.
just in case I'm hit by a bus.
Okay. Is that okay, Judy? Great, thank you. So anything else on the mission and core value statements? Judy, thank you for doing that work. And thank you for keeping track of the versions so that we know which one we're at, we don't get confused. Principles, rate structures, categories, use of room subcommittee. Sorry for Fraser. Mimi and Fraser were the ones who were kind of working on that. And then Mimi was going to hopefully be here. And from my. That's the last one. But that's okay. No problems. From Mrs. Liam, not to, the last time we met as a full subcommittee, we were kind of waiting for Kirsten to give us some larger guidance in that. Now I'm wondering if the way we were approaching this is the right way, in the sense that we were waiting for Kirsten to give us, so we could actually come up with some figures or start working on a spreadsheet, was to get some, some kind of base numbers from Kirsten or a way of looking at it. But I imagine she's been way too busy to do that. So I'm wondering if we need to just shift our strategy a little bit. We know where we're trying to get to. A document we can look at where we can plug some numbers in to make some decisions. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
My apologies, Kim. I think I think Kristen did do some work on that, but you're absolutely right. She's been distracted by budget and other priorities, and so,
yeah.
But I do know that we were working on essentially building out that similar format from, I think it was the Coquitlam School District's format, but with numbers that were more relevant to us. And so I'll circle back with Kristen. I'm just writing myself a note about that right now to see where that was at, because I know she did work on it. And so
right. And there was some work done. I mean, what we did it in the subcommittee level, right? About not so much the numbers, but the way in which it's going to be managed, which was a bit of a crossover from the management model, but it was literally about how those rooms would be done. And I think it's premature any kind of a report to come to this committee level, because we don't have a document yet where we can look at and go like, yes, that's the rate structure, or this is what we're going to do. So the question we have now is, how are we going to move forward in this area of because it's got rate structures, categories, that kind of work. Because I think I keep looking at you, Jillian, because I remember sitting in a room and working through this, and I'm just not sure exactly where we are in terms of draft level. From when I saw you did really good work on this, but it's just not in a form yet that we have got to put forward. Is that right?
Yes, no, none of we don't have an actual document, but we have a concept of categories, which I think we could all talk about. And
well, we want to. I think most people know it. Again, we want to figure out who's going to do the work to put it in a form to present it. Right? Because I think I keep hearing that we're getting to that place where we want the committee to be moving towards creating some documents for us to discuss, but then with the intention of them, they're going to be put forward, right? So I don't know if we need to we could talk through what we're all going to do, but that's only useful if we know who's actually taking the information and going to create a document from it, right? So I keep looking around going, who's going to... because you're right. Just before we launch into it, I don't want to launch into a discussion and then not know who's organizing the document. Yeah.
Right. Well, sort of, if I'm speaking more about management.
Exactly, and I think,
When I say this, I would think maybe our next subcommittee meeting, we generate that document.
yeah. So I would suggest what we do is we just,
One or the management model, I'm not involved in the rates. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
the rates.
Sorry, I know that's one.
Rates we were waiting on.
And I think in a way, I think we need the management model to figure that out because the rates, the actual document with the rates and the structure in it and what people are going to pay, I think the management model is going to look at that and they need more input to figure out what that is. And I think the one thing which I know is, again, it's a bit like the building in that way, is it's still a bit premature to lock into any kind of numbers. There's just not enough information known to lock into numbers. However, we definitely are moving towards a process of determining those numbers. So I think determining the numbers is good. And then there's the issue of communicating those decisions. What's the communication strategy? Because we do know that there are probably user groups out there that are waiting for that information to make a decision, right? So we don't want to make the mistake with the building of communicating too soon and then having to retract what we said, right? Am I right on that?
Well, we wouldn't be communicating until it's set.
No, exactly, but that's what I mean. So we're not ready to set it. Like even the ballparking it, there's a risk when you ballpark stuff and they're lying around, or you create a document, you say this is a draft version of what it might be. So I'm just saying it's advantageous not to have put a bunch of numbers down, going, and then forget that we've had to change them. So I think that we need to probably bump up, just make the rates and structure and category of rooms committee will become more important once the management model is a little bit more in place. Because it's always obviously the same people. Some of us are the same people anyway, right? So I'm going to recommend that we table this. But to the next meeting, we're going to action on this one is a draft document. Okay, so at the next meeting, we have a draft document from this committee.
The principles, grade
Yeah.
structures and categories.
Yeah.
Is it room categories?
Room categories, yeah, it was,
But I think, Kim, you're right, that the management model needs to be more solid.
Yeah.
Before,
exactly, yeah.
and we decided that I think the last meeting is
Yeah.
that, okay, one comes before the other.
Yeah, because and I just think again, Liam, this is a good way of even looking forward. So how is it, and this is a question even for you, Jillian, how is it working with Kristen and the way her position interacts with that decision making? Like the input that comes in, and then it affects the decisions, and then the information can go back to her. So what's happened is we talked about that, and because she's so busy, we only had one meeting where Kristen was at, which was extremely helpful, right? But now I don't know, does she need to be at the next meeting? Is it in order for that thing to move forward, Kristen needs to be there? Do you know what I mean? That's me asking about process. Or do we go on our own, start working on stuff, and then how does that work interact with Kristen? Do we then send it to her, she looks at it, and we come back to it? You know what I mean?
I would almost recommend that for the rate structure itself, I'll circle back with her to see where that landed. And if this committee is meeting, does this committee meet bi-weekly or monthly?
Well, the thing about the structures committee hasn't met since we first did it because we were waiting for the information.
Oh,
That's
okay.
like a communication thing. So I'm asking this
Right.
question. Should we wait till Kristen's available to talk to her? Or should we start meeting and start figuring things out and then have her plug in when she can?
We don't
Well,
have a monthly schedule with this
Yeah,
group.
so let me circle back with Kristen on this one, and then I would suggest that she comes to the next rate structure meeting and we circulate availability to that group. And we And at the very least, if Kristen's not there, then myself or
Right.
or somebody else can speak to it.
Right,
But I
okay,
think
yeah.
I'll try to convince her to be there if she can.
Yeah, Jillian,
Thinking about it, there's different elements to that rate structure that need to be put together. And one of the core elements, as you're talking about, is directly correlated to the base cost of operating.
Yeah.
Right? And that's kind of the key piece that while Kristen is putting that together, it's quite difficult for her to do that.
Exactly.
The operational, obviously, right? But then, so I'm thinking maybe that is the piece that, yes, requires some key work to be done and key involvement with Kristen. But there are other components of the rate structure that I think work could be done on potentially, whether that's about the add-ons for the tech or the different equipment uses. Like these are pieces of that entire puzzle that is not waiting for that element.
right,
So I would suggest perhaps that could be that area.
Right.
So
yeah, and then,
some work in the meantime.
yeah, and then it does kind of circle back to the management model because you want to make sure you've got all the information, right? Like, I think we're getting quite close to the structure. You know, the structure part of it. So that's actually generating a document, not with any necessarily numbers in it, but it's generating a document about how it's going to work, not so much what the numbers are. So we could move ahead with that without Kristen,
Yeah.
right? So then we don't necessarily need Kristen at the next meeting in order to generate that document. The question is, for the next meeting of of this committee,
I've suggested Tuesday,
Yeah.
May 7th.
sure, good. She's already suggested Tuesday, May 7th. I see that down here for this meeting. I can speak to that. I'm going to be, I'll be online on that meeting. But Tuesday, May 7th. So it would be good to have this rough document, which is on the bottom of this agenda. It would be good to have this rates and structure meeting. I think what we did is we went off in a area which we don't have a report from Mimi, and Mimi was going to do some research. The plan on that committee was to come at it from the other way to kind of figure out what the market was out there, get some numbers that we could look at. So we were reverse engineering it from both sides, right? One from the Christian side and one from, she was going to research Bowen. She was also going to look at the ways that things were done at like the Roundhouse, which was a category thing. Do they have add-ons or not? That kind of stuff. So we're kind of held up, but we should move forward on that. And we should have some document, it's an action. Just going, who's going to pick the document? The action is that at the May 7th meeting, there will be a document coming from that committee. Not necessarily with numbers in it, right? It's a how document, not the numbers. Okay, good. Anything else to add on the rate structures? No, good. Forever hold your peace. Good. Action. Who's going to deliver that document? Well, we didn't put a name to it, so I'm now nervous.
Well, we have it for the subcommittee, but we could do is put a name to who's going to organize that subcommittee meeting.
Yeah, who's going to organize the subcommittee meeting and make sure that that document is created?
Who's on the committee? What's on?
She's not
She's not here, so there's a risk of giving somebody a job when they're not
Well,
here.
why don't we as a subcommittee then meet
Yeah.
and then make that decision as a group?
Sure, well, then you just someone in that subcommittee will have something, somebody will give something to
Why don't you
this.
guys just set a date?
We have already, May 7th.
Well, that's.
No,
That's
that's
for
it.
the JMC.
Yeah, I know, it's gonna be next week.
Well, I mean, because you two are the only two present, I think
We
that's,
can meet next week.
maybe you could just make a plan.
We'll talk.
On that one.
We'll take that one
Still
off.
on that one?
Yeah.
What does apparently mean?
Well, it's like,
Okay.
I think we just need something that is of use to move that forward. Good. Because it's tied into the management model subcommittee, which is a little bit larger. This is because you guys have been doing a lot of work on the management model. Things with a lot has transpired in that. So who's actually, we've got down giving.
Well, I was written to do it, but I missed that last meeting, so
Yeah.
I'm wondering if Gail might
be
Or
able to.
Jamie or Gail, or both of you, just want to where we
We
are?
didn't prepare because it was said that Fraser was.
Right, I didn't. And then I looked at it today and thought, wow, I wasn't there the last.
Effort, because there's a lot of moving parts, even Lee, right? You guys have done some work.
I have a question, Lee. You kept notes at the last meeting that we had. That was 2 meetings ago.
No,
The last meeting
when
was,
last came.
but it was mostly updating Kim
Yeah.
on our previous meeting. There weren't,
Because
we
you have
had a
this-
lot of talk about.
You have this spreadsheet, this one.
Yes.
Did you update that after the last meeting? Because this is from 2 meetings.
I changed the priority groups. That was really the only thing that changed.
Okay,
Okay.
but that would be
We just
helpful.
went to 3.
Yeah, and just to remind you, the last full committee meeting was like just when we approved those minutes. It was a while ago, and so you've met a few times. So just for the sake of recording it, maybe you can give a little summary of like what meetings have happened since the last meeting, just so we captured it, you know, because it's moved forward quite a bit, right? So just that date of that last meeting.
So there were 2 then, since the last meeting. We met on March 8th and then again on March 15th. And we started to talk about what would that process look like of making a booking? What is a hold? What is a booking? When are deposits due and all of this, thinking it out for the different types of user groups and in the rooms, like how far in advance could somebody make a booking? And then, or a hold rather, and before a deposit is required. So, and we, so essentially looking at 2 years advance being the maximum time out that somebody could book for regardless of the space or category of user that they're in. And we also looked at, well, what does that look like with time allotments with the different rooms? And that's something that we'll have to come back to because there's different needs for different spaces. So like if you're thinking of different time blocks for different rooms. Then within a 3-month period, no, 6-month, we said in this one.
Didn't change too much. Yeah, it ended.
So,
That document you do not want to be open. Okay?
no,
It's just,
no, we're just talking it out, but looking at, a 6-month prior to the date of the event that a deposit would be required. And then nothing concrete, but looking at, well, what would the amount of that deposit be? When, how much of it is refundable or not? All of these issues. And then looking at, what is the cutoff for that refund by which time it would be impossible for us to get another user into the space. We've therefore lost that booking opportunity. So what we kind of did, after coming up with some ideas of this, then we started thinking out different potential scenarios and just sort of walking them through this model and how did it work. And that's why we ended up with sort of like a lot of different notes of different ways that it might play out. So I think, again, we need, as our action item here, is to bring our proposal of this to the committee for the next one of these timelines for that. We also spent quite a bit of time talking about the user groups, right? And that's one of the things that's intersecting between the different subcommittees. And we believe we talked about it this last time, right? But narrowed it down into
more recently.
3 user groups. Here, 2. 3. The not-for-profit, private, being a private event that's not revenue generating, and commercial, which is essentially a private event that is revenue generating. And within each one of these categories, there'd be the opportunity for a locals discount or subsidy. So that's
Good.
And I just want to, thank you so much for summarizing that. And I just want to highlight the reason that we settled on that over the 4, we had sort of originally in 4 categories. We broke it, we shifted it to 3 with a sort of overarching locals discount that would bring everything, sort of drop it down a rate. We thought that it would be wise to do it that way so that it was very clear to our community that they have a priority position within our organization or within the center. And that was, I don't remember the term that you used, Kim, that you bringing up at the last meeting, but we brought it to that because we wanted that sort of accountability of serving that the center was serving our community to be very easy to see. It's transparent. It's right there. You can't sort of miss that. So.
Very good. Thank you, Gail. And,
So priorities for booking and subsidy
right.
pricing.
Yeah.
We've not discussed priorities for booking.
No, but we talked a lot about that, but for the community, they would have priority booking.
Yeah, so how that plays out in
We
policy
hadn't figured
needs to
out.
be
Refined.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we decided that, but.
Okay.
We did discuss that.
Yeah.
Oh, we talked.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Absolutely.
Sorry.
Judy.
So it looks like there's at least the four of you that have been involved in that. Is this the management model subcommittee or the principals rate structure?
Oh, no, we moved on to management.
This is the management model, believe it or not, because it was, it's because they were looking at how the space would be managed.
Okay.
Right? Just, I mean, it looks like it's a crossover, but it was actually about how bookings would be managed and how the use of the space would be managed. And so that's where and there is a crossover in it.
Yeah.
March 8th and March 15th is the management model. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem. Sorry.
They went in and ended up talking about that. There's another thing too, because the last official meeting was actually it was January, really. So even since then, there's another update, which is more on the higher level because Lee has been high, like Lee, you were not the last time this committee officially met.
It was.
You were actually at that one. Oh, yeah, right. That was your first one you got introduced in. So has there been any updates in terms of that higher level thing, which is leading into a relationship with the hearth, that kind of stuff, right? That we want to report.
I fully understand.
It's because Hearth has identified a position that might be a
Let's
higher.
just hold on, because that's the management.
7.3.
It does affect the management model, like generally, because it's like, it is about how the space is going to be managed in some way, right? Or like, we don't have it recorded anywhere, the discussions that have happened about how that relationship would work between the municipality and somebody who was working with the hearth. Not that we've made decisions in that area. We just want to report that in fact, that's a plan that's in place right now. Because when we met in January, the last time that we met, we don't have anything, we didn't talk about it, is what I'm saying. So you know what I'm doing? Just trying to make sure we're that the people are the whole committee's up to speed on that. So where are we exactly with that? Like what's? You have to talk or?
I think
Liam, do you want to speak to that? Oh, his little hand is up in the air. Thank you, Liam. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to it, but I really welcome Jamie or Gail or Councillor Getty to join in too, because you've been part of that discussion as well. So we had myself and Mayor Leonard and Councillor Getty had a great meeting with the Hearth Board. Oh geez, it was a little while ago now, a few weeks back.
March 13th.
Well, look at you go. Yeah.
It happened to be a particularly difficult day for me, so the date is.
Oh, that was the storm. You were still without power and like.
It's a big day. Just say.
Yeah. So we had a great meeting with the Hearth Board, and it was a great introduction to meet a lot of them. I had not met many of them before, but we did talk at length. I think it was about an hour and a half of what the relationship between the two organizations may look like going forward. And really, it was about, planting some seeds for ideas to grow about what the opportunities look like or are available for the Hearth if they so choose to step forward to take on some of those responsibilities. And Gail and Jamie, and I'm sure there were others involved, but I think they did most of the work about putting together a job description of what a event coordinator / program director could look like for managing the bookings of the community spaces in the facility. But it's still a bit early days, and so we haven't actually had a chance to sit down and review the proposal or the draft job description that they put together in a collaborative way. So they've shared it with us, and I believe it was shared to this group. And so that is one approach and one model that we're open to as a municipality, being we, where effectively that position would be responsible for managing the bookings and coordinating the space use, the community space use, but they would be effectively a Hearth employee. And so then we would need a very clear and solid agreement with the Hearth in terms of what the expectations were. That would probably then show up in that job description or elsewhere. And so, I think that's a model that a lot of folks are keen on. And another model, if the Hearth were to sort of say, well, you know what, we're not actually interested in pursuing that any further, then it would probably revert back to a municipal staff that was hired through the municipal channels to fulfill that role. But no matter what, whoever's filling that role, whether it's a Hearth employee or a BIM employee, I think that Jamie and Gail have done a lot of the work in starting to identify okay, well, what are the actual responsibilities? Because that's critical. We need to start to understand what that person is going to be doing, because Lee is not, as the facility manager, is a very different role, and is not going to be able to take all of that on.
Great, good.
And
Thank
so
you, Liam.
Jamie, you got anything to add to that, or Gail?
Just in the description of the role, Liam, I just wanted to add that it's programming for the large multi-purpose space for the arts.
Oh, it's restricted to that?
Sorry?
It's limited to only programming that one space?
That's what the.
Well, what we wrote, so the first time we wrote a job description, the smaller one, the one that was much less, much less ambitious. Wait, sorry, I just want to start back a second. Thank you, Liam, for kind of contextualizing that for everybody. The meeting was a real success. We had a really good, we felt like we all learned a lot about kind of underlying, sort of the discussions that are happening on either side. And it really was a productive meeting. And so one of the things that came of that meeting was we started to realize that the first job description that we put forward, which was a very, very bare bones job description based on essentially what was being paid out from the endowment fund, and which was almost nothing, with the vision of it being a growing, like a seed from which a real position would grow. Instead, Councillor Getty and everyone from the municipal staff were saying, why don't we just do it the opposite way? Why don't we build out the real position and then we cut back if we don't have the funding for it? So we went at it the opposite way. And in doing that, Liam, what we did was we took the grant opportunity that was in front of us, that we were actually trying to use this job description to help clarify how we were going to write the grant. We took the grant criteria and we wrote the job description accordingly. If we were to get that grant, it is not like an event coordinator grant, it's an arts grant. And so that's why the position is called the Artistic Programming Director. Because to apply for that BC Arts Center, the BC Arts Council's Arts Impact Grant, we needed to focus on the arts. And so that's the new job description is very much kind of an arts programming coordinator, arts programming director. So when you take a look at that, if we were to get that grant, it would have to be applied towards those kinds of priorities. I got a sense from another conversation that the idea of the hearth booking the whole center was not in line with what the municipality was really saw as the right, maybe it was through the subcommittee, but that it might not work that well for the hearth to oversee all booking. And so what we did was we used this particular grant criteria to write the job description. If we don't like the direction of it, we might not get the grant. If we do like the job description and we get the grant, then we have the basis for a good, but I think we need to move forward with discussing it. Like, it was just us taking the results of the meeting and taking the criteria of the grant and crafting something that intersected those two things.
Right. Okay, that's helpful, Gail. I think what would be useful is to come at it in that same way that you did, but let's sort of park the grant criteria on the side.
Yeah.
And sort of say like, all right, well, what do we actually need regardless of the grant? And just sort of looking at the space, like this committee's primary mandate is to, provide oversight and guidance to managing the entire facility. So if we're looking at, okay, well, what do we need to have in place from a staffing model to ensure that the space is being booked and coordinated in the best way possible?
Thank you, Liam. And did you have your hand up?
No,
Julia?
but I do feel actually that with this job description, we can actually build out more of that spreadsheet, that task, and see where the gaps still remain.
Right. And that was a very good point, Jillian. And also, which is actually an interesting segue into the policy documents, there are things that need to be put in place for the center to be operational. And there are interesting opportunities and ideas of seeds to be planted for future growth, for things to happen that are not happening right now. And I think it's good for us to keep that in mind. We're kind of doing both. There are things that have to be in place before the place will open. And at the same time, we want to make sure that there's space and thought has been put into how the place will grow, right? Does that make sense? And so, so what is the action that we need for the next step of this management subcommittee, like of this management model? What would be the next thing that would come forward here? Think. Like, on one side, there's going to be policy documents that are going to come up. There probably is, Liam was indicating, there needs to be some kind of description of how the activity from right from when it opens is going to be managed, as well as space or creation and energy being put into something that's going to grow, which is this potential hearth position, right? So there's not just one thing. So we want to move on kind of those fronts. So
So does that mean that we look at that spreadsheet and we see where the gaps are and compare it to this?
yeah.
And see,
I think that might be part of it, but what I'm hearing and thinking as well is what, what both Liam and Gail just said is that, looking at this collaboratively too. And, is this meeting the needs of the sites? Is it meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like there's so many pieces at play.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to, and I think if we look at it again, I want to do the timeline thing because that's helpful, because the things that need to be in place in order for it to function from day one, those are the things that actually get priority because they need to be concrete sooner, right? But you can't separate that out from long-term planning, where things are going, long-term strategic planning, grant opportunities, things that need to be put in place. So they're tied together, but some have a higher priority than others, right? So I'm not sure how to get at it. Because there's a few moving pieces in this area, right? So I'm trying to make a concrete recommendation for what the actions are for the next, where we're helping to strategize a bit, going, what do we need to prioritize of all the things that we're looking at? Yeah,
Well, I just want to step back because when Steph was catching up that we had switched from the rate structures to the management model subcommittee, we said that we had held 2 meetings since our last JMC meeting. But we actually held 2 since our last working JMC
Oh, yeah.
meeting. Our last official JMC meeting, we've held 6,
Yeah.
Steph. The management
Yeah, I
model
know.
subcommittee
It's going-
met a
Management
number.
model is winning.
Yeah, we-
No minutes, okay.
We were really cruising along, doing a lot of meetings. And, so the first job description that was written from the first round of sort of the tone of the first set of discussions that was happening in that management model subcommittee. It was much more booking oriented, and that was where Jamie was taking. It was much more like we were going to book the whole facility. And then as we started to kind of, especially with Kim coming back, and it starts to get about, all the add-ons and how do we bring arts groups in and make sure that they have a liaison and make sure that they can put their stuff on stage and get off stage and not leave the place in shambles for the facility manager, that there be like a liaison. That's when I started to shift it more towards the artistic programming director. And because of the grant and the possibility of getting something like $25,000. I think that the next step is to actually have this collaborative discussion around the hearth hire. What does it actually need to be? Because we are open, but we can't use 25,000 towards a kind of a booking manager for the space. That wouldn't work. Like, we wouldn't be able to use an arts grant for that purpose. As long as it has an arts curatorial function in some way, we could probably do a blended description. But it's a time, you see, I was going to talk about this all when I got to 7.2 on the upcoming grant opportunities, but I don't mind that we just, you're asking about this now.
well, kind of, not specifically about that. I think we can get to that.
Okay.
I just want to remember back that at the beginning of the management model, Jillian created a task spreadsheet. It wasn't a personal spreadsheet. And then we were going, well, who's going to do it? But I do think it's important to look back at the task model and figure out what are the things that need to be done. And, and then, yes, of course, who's going to do them? But I think we're in a situation whereas until the hire happens, or even at the municipal level, we keep looking at Jillian, but there's a kind of an underlying assumption that Jillian is going to be doing this, but then that was before Lee was hired. And so now Lee has got some jobs. We're getting a bit more concrete on what it is. But what I think we need to have as a next step is a document that goes kind of back to what you were working on, Jillian, which is these are the things that need to be in place. And it's either going to be done by Lee or it's going to be done by somebody in the municipality, or it's something that may be done by the Hearth if the Hearth gets a hire or if they have some money to do it. It's that beginning of that kind of a spreadsheet that looks at what needs to be in place like first, right? And then we can look at the other stuff, because I feel that work about getting ready for like July or August is part of what the purview of this committee is. Do you know what I mean? So it doesn't mean that it's very important that the collaborative work continues, but if we have some kind of a task document, right? Makes sense?
So I think those 2 things can happen at the same time.
Yeah.
I think, we can build up that task document further. If you recall, when I first started it, there was a whole set of information for opening day and then future state.
Exactly.
Right? And then we got rid of future state because
Yeah.
we're like, no, we just need to figure it out for when we're opening. For now, we'll bring it back. It doesn't work out anywhere. So.
No, and I think it's just like, it may be just a refresh of that because this committee actually looked at that document. So it's not like new to the committee. So maybe an action item is to just go back and revisit that document and update it at the same time, add in like a vision, like of where it's going. Is that too much to ask? Go.
I have just a little bit of a worry about doing it in that order. If we use that document to draft both job descriptions. We went through and it was a very effective, it's a great spreadsheet. So we built the first one from it, right there.
Yep.
And we used it to highlight some of the things that we could tick off when we did the second one.
Right.
So it's a super effective document, but if we go back to it, we're still not doing the thing that what really needs to happen, which is that Liam has to be involved in a discussion in which we really collaboratively look at our options to build out that job description. We're open, we're interested, we want the collaborative discussion, and that document is incorporated into two very different visions. And so we want, yes, it's already in use, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly, yeah.
And the second thing that I'd like to say is the concern about, there's a timing thing. If the grant application does end up providing some of the funding for the position, we will not know that until August 2nd-ish. So if it's a booking person, you can see how we'd be way behind the timeline of what the municipality really needs to open this center.
May I make a provocative suggestion? In my view, we're kind of functioning at this committee level like it's going to be with these hires. So Lee is hired. Jillian, you're working for the municipality with the mandate of recreation, right? And Jamie and Gail are here as part of the hearth, where we're looking to hire somebody. Maybe what we need to look at is how we're going to work how that's going to work together. Like what, do we need some kind of, is it an LOA? Is it a policy document? Is it a meeting schedule? Like, how is it going to work? Is it's going to continue on working? Do you know what I mean? It's not going to end. The process is going to continue on. At some point, there'll be a hire, so there'll be somebody sitting working from the hearth here. Is it Jillian who's continuing to work there? Was it me?
What's an LOA?
Letter of agreement.
Thank you.
Sorry, a letter of agreement, right? Just like when you do it, like how, I'm just trying to figure out how that process keeps going, because my sense is this is a continuing process, right? It's how the place is going to be managed. So what is the next step? Sorry, Liam, I keep missing your funny little hand up there. Go ahead. Because I keep looking at Jillian and Lee, and I'm sorry, I don't look at you.
That's okay. No, this is all good. And yeah, I do agree. We need to have that conversation that Gail's talking about. And Gail, a question about the funding for the artistic program director position. Is that a one-time opportunity or is that an ongoing
As far as we know.
Yeah.
It could be an annual thing. I'm not sure. You never know.
Well, we've received an impact grant. I can speak to that. The particular program that you've applied to, the organization I run, we've received funding from that. They're one-time grants, but they're meant to set something up. So if you're successful with an impact grant, you can come back to the table again. So it's an annual program. However, what they do is they try and use it so that you are going to be weaned off of that particular program, right? So it is a one-time only grant, but the program is ongoing. And I've known of organizations that have gotten a grant and then gotten another grant for the next phase of that position with the understanding that they're going to move out of that grant program. Does that help, Liam?
Yep.
I'd like to add to that, Liam, because it's a really valuable question. You actually, I think I kind of laid it out in an email, which I'll try and send to you again, but there is a nice progression that we can expect from it if we're successful. we probably could get one follow-up, and then after that, we're in the right position to apply to Canadian Heritage, and
Right.
that would be an annual grant.
Right.
Yeah, and that becomes an annual programming grant for that artistic programming director. So yes, the idea is to be building in towards an annual funding
Right.
situation. Uh-huh.
And so
But it's a-
I liked what I heard you say earlier too, Gail, about it being like, I don't know what term you used, but something along the lines of like a hybrid, like where we know that the position needs to provide support to arts and culture with certainty. But there's perhaps other uses of the space or booking and things like that that maybe wouldn't fit so nicely in that arts and culture box. And so it's recognizing that, like, okay, maybe the position is partly funded through these other external agencies, knowing that it's trying to do more than just the one thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just bringing us back to the actions coming out of this, like literally, what is the next step for the next meeting? You get a sense of what we need. And I'm looking at it as a segue into the policy document stuff, because that's actually all about what needs to be in place. And is there any specific action from the management committee model? What I'm hearing is obviously there's going to be another meeting. It's going to be collaborative in terms of looking at the job description and how we can work together. But
It's beyond our subcommittee's jurisdiction, figuring out this,
figuring this out.
looking at this job description and identifying the needs of the space. That's not really the subcommittee's.
Right, so it needs to be done at this committee level then, right?
I'm not sure that I was gonna turn to Liam and
Like,
ask.
or is it even higher
I
up?
think it is higher up potentially.
Okay, so what's the process then?
Well,
What's the-
I think this group is well positioned to talk about, like, okay, I would come back to what do we need to open the doors? Because now that I'm starting to understand this artistic program director position a little better and how it was, like where the ideas were coming from, it's clear to me that we need something different. Like, we couldn't just open the doors with that, right? Like, we need somebody that's going to actually do booking and coordinating and that kind of a thing across more than just the arts, right? For the large multipurpose room. So I think we need to zero in on, like, okay, well, what is it that we really do need for the opening? And what I am interpreting that artistic program director position sounds like fantastic, and that's that kind of blue sky. Wouldn't that be amazing? And maybe we can get both. Or maybe we're finding somebody that can do both. So I think that this table is well positioned to have that discussion, and then ultimately, the ideal process would be that this committee lands on agreement about, yeah, this is the position that we need to focus on filling, and then making a recommendation to council to say, like, we believe that in order for the facility to meet the needs of the community, this position needs to be supported. And this is how we envision it to be funded. If it is going to have an arts focus and a primary focus on the theater room, then we anticipate we can get $25,000 a year in funding. But that's not going to be enough. And so it's going to have to be supplemented through income from rentals and the like. But we also anticipate that we're still going to be short. And so we need the municipality to provide, $15,000 or $20,000 a year in operational funds or something like that. Don't quote me on that.
No, that's good. Yeah.
But it's the proposal.
Yeah.
And so then that goes to council for consideration, and council says, yeah, we like this. We think this can work. And we want to see a draft of the operating agreement between the Hearth and the municipality, if this is gonna be a Hearth staff member or something like that.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you, Liam. That's a very good step. I think that gives a bit of indication of like the work that needs to be done. And I think in addition to that, from the, which is, I guess, leading to the policy documents, to get the place opened, there will be, I think I'd like to just put an action item for the subcommittee to start working on something that would be turning into a proposal that would be going to council. That would outline heading towards a letter of agreement between the Hearth and the municipality. Seems to make sense, like that's the direction that's going in. The part that goes with that is the kind of policy documents that are needed for how the facility is going to be managed and run, which you guys have been working on. So I think I want to leave that as one action item and then move to the next thing is introducing of the policy documents, because I have a feeling in there is captured some of these questions that we have, right? So good to hear what that task is, because it's important. Is everyone okay with that? So that committee is going to meet, work collaboratively, head towards putting some of those elements in place. Any other thoughts before we leave management model and go to the next agenda?
Can I share my screen of what I have captured for action items to make sure they're
Sure,
accurate?
yeah, absolutely. There's a lot out of this one, yeah.
I only have 2
Yeah,
and they may not be right.
oh, okay,
And let me, if we can do all 3 groups, would
Yep.
be helpful. So just from January 16th, the mission and core values was work on version 6.
Yep.
And I've got Councillor Getty share version 9. It's the only action for that group.
that's right.
Okay. Do you want the committee to do anything with that sharing? Provide comments?
I'll take comments.
Yeah, we can, yeah,
Okay, so we'll say,
it's specifically to review it, to be included in the policy documents. This is where we're heading with it. So if anybody like to review it with the understanding that it's going to get added into the policy documents. So that in fact.
It's very, very high level motherhood and apple pie.
Yeah, that's what they're supposed to be.
okay, I'm not gonna put that note that
Yeah.
it will be included.
Yeah, just-
We know now. Now everyone knows.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is the principles and rate structures group. Just to be clear, January 16th, we had gathered these 2 sections of categories of information, what people are paying already and number of user nights they have. So I'm going to assume that's going to roll over since we don't have that yet.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and then we've got the have a draft document structure, but that's not this one. That's the next one. That's the management model.
Yeah.
Not necessarily including numbers.
That's right.
This is for the next one.
No, that was correct. That's what.
No, that was.
That's for this one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna carry over this one from January. Sorry about this, guys. I just
No.
want to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay. Carry over this one from last time. Gather those documents, and the second one is have a structure without numbers.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, 2 for that group.
Yep.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Management model subcommittee, Jillian, you're talking about these timelines of 2 years, 6 months, 3 months. That was gonna maybe come into something,
Yeah.
a proposal? Is there anything more you want to say on that? Like, is it a document? Is it a?
It's then gets put into the policy documents
policy
as well
document, okay.
after, so it would just
For
be
inclusion and,
agreements.
okay,
Yeah, I think what,
good. And the next,
sorry, go ahead.
right, just before it gets interesting again,
Yep,
just,
go ahead.
thank you. And then it's something about this job description. I'm not sure exactly how we landed. We want an operating agreement, a proposal for council. You don't want it to be the subcommittee. You said it has
That's
to be
right.
that
So-
subcommittee. Maybe it's not.
But I think it's like still, I think what we're looking at is working on preparing documents that can be used within the policy structure. Getting towards opening is what we're really doing. So we're we're actually all working on like trying to put things on paper in a clear way that can inform how things are working, right? So these are like draft documents that can be used in a suite of policy documents that are going to be put forward, that are going to go to council to outline how the place is going to operate. That's kind of what I'm sensing. So you guys keep jumping because we want to get to the work where you report about what these policy documents are that we need. So this one is about what's the next step at the management model, and it might be in place already or just need to be read by the subcommittee and amended, right? So I don't know that. So that action is, they're going to continue to meet, but the direction is towards creating some kind of document that can be used to be put towards council on how the relationship between the hearth and the municipality will in the managing of, the bookings and stuff, right, Judy?
The spreadsheet that we did before that was all the different colors and everything that had the list of tasks. If that could be, I found that very helpful. And so if that could be adapted, maybe another column in terms of the BC Arts Council funding application or grant application. Yeah, and then I think we need to sort out, if we're not successful with that and all we've got is the endowment money, like what's fundamental in terms of what can't we live without? And then that gives us an argument to go to council with in terms of if we need to have something, we can categorize the tasks for that. Whatever we see that whether it's that job description or another, this is what we're going to need to run this facility successfully. And this is startup and we can grow into this. And this is maybe later stages or however we divide it up. But I think whether we get that funding or whether we have to go back to council and get some funding or, we don't get any funding and we're stuck with or all we have is the endowment to play with. What have we got? What have we got? Is that going to be enough? Can we function? And
That's
that'll help us
thank you.
build the argument.
So saying, sorting out what the absolute needs are and where it was growing to.
So I see that the document for, the draft operating agreement with the Hearth and PM, and I think that's quite a bit down the road.
Yeah.
We're not anywhere
No.
near. And
What's the-
so the action items to me are related to that spreadsheet
Yeah.
and working on that a little bit together. It's related to a fulsome discussion of this job description and everybody understanding what it actually means, the intention behind what it means. And if this committee would like the subcommittee to have a go at that first, we could. I'm not 100% convinced all the right players are at the table there.
Not yet. No. I think, may I make a suggestion? I don't want to get things off track, but thank you for that in terms of we're trying to craft what an action item is and to bring some of these things into a concrete level, a concrete place. It seems to me that what we might be trying to work towards is what I would call like an operations manual or something. They'll have policy documents in it. It could have other pieces together that the committee's been working on that we're gathering together to put together. So it's got policy in it, but it's got some like an operations manual, right? Like so that it's a bit concrete coming out of what we've been meeting and talking about. So I'm trying to figure out a way to capture that so that when we have action items, we can make something that we know what we're putting it into. Some of that's going to go to council. Some of it's just going to be a documentation of like what we've decided. And some of it's going to be really useful, like day-to-day stuff, like, have job descriptions in it and how they intersect. Is that I'm trying to get a sense of what we're working towards here, right? If we it's an operations kind of manual, then the next step would be for the subcommittee to make one little part of that, right? Like review the spreadsheet to update it so it could be put in. The job description.
Who else do you think needs to be at the table?
Whoever has the decision-making authority.
Oh, there he is on screen.
Well, again, so Liam, that's, you know, I mean, if some things, from my understanding, some things are gonna have to go to council for approval. Some things are in the purview of this committee to make a decision on, right? And some things may be delegated or be done from a city level, right? Or Jillian has the authority or Lee has the authority
Well,
to
we're
do
just
that.
talking about this.
Yeah, yeah, well, exactly, but I'm trying to make it concrete that we know what we're, like, when we sit down and actually make something, we know who it's for, like who's gonna look at it and what use is it gonna be, right? So some of it's being made just for us circulation and information, but some of it has to go to different places, right? So I just threw out the notion of an operations manual, so we don't have to decide right now what it is. We're just gonna put it into a folder, right? And then we'll figure out what needs to be in the folder. Does that make sense? That's the next step, right? So, what are the things that we need to put in, like from the management model, what would you want to see in that folder? Like just the next step. This is literally start getting ready to put things in. Before we get to, you know, then we'll have a meeting where the whole committee will look at what's in the folder and decide, is this something that Liam needs to approve? Is this something that has to go to council? Is this something that is just going to be of use?
Yeah, exactly. And so and you're right, in that folder, there'll be policies, there'll be procedures and, you know, there'll be a SOP, standard operating procedure manual, right? But for this particular one, yeah, the council will need to have the ultimate decision on if we're talking about this position.
So do you like this is an action, what is highlighted there? Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Okay. Oh, I can make it bigger.
And ultimately, I think like, yeah, we identify, okay, here's all the things that we really need to have happen. And maybe here's some nice things that we'd like to have happen. And then if like the Hearth is successful in getting the grant funding, then okay, great. We know we're moving, or we have the opportunity to move in that direction, but we know we still have to fill all these gaps over here, and how are we going to do that?
Good. Yes, Gail.
Okay, so I think that maybe some of the reluctance you might be feeling from the subcommittee, the management model subcommittee, is that we have a big task right now, I think, in A.
Yeah.
And B is really related, but for us to work on the actual job description might be slightly askew in terms of where we're at. Like Jillian's first comment was that our next meeting would be focused on kind of summarizing, right, where we've gotten to and making it digestible in something you could read and put into your folder.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really good first task. And the second one, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, as a subcommittee, discuss it, but I kind of agree with where Jillian is at, what she's stating, which is that we might need a little bit more kind of like perspective from above the JMC on what is, because, you know, we've taken a couple of stabs now. My next stab, if I was to synthesize what I'm hearing at today's meeting, would be to do something like a hybrid job description.
Right.
The job description for year one and the job description from year two on. And what I'm beginning to see is that maybe what we need to do is take the job description that was written and think of that as more the long-term perspective. And maybe in year two, we could incorporate it, where in year one, we would need to allocate a lot more of that person's time towards booking the facility because we need to open operationally. I mean, as an operating facility. The reason why the long-term vision of this, what we did right, is important is two reasons. One, This is how you make money. You need someone who's out there seeking really good content for that theater and making sure it makes it on stage and making sure there's a lot of bums in seats seeing those. That is a very big job. And it ultimately might not, it will be a full job. Maybe not in year one. And that's where we could hybridize it in year one. In year one, we're just going to be trying to get the center open. And we aren't going to have, 18 to 24 programs that first year. And so I could totally see how maybe that's our next run at this, is to hybridize for year one with a long-term vision for years 2 on, because that's how we will attract the long-term funding, but meet the needs of opening year. And what we could see, I can see from this conversation, is that the municipality, if it's able to allocate some funding towards the position, that would be some guaranteed funding, whereas the grant we won't know about until August. So the portion that might be municipal and the municipalities, the council votes to support, combined with the endowment fund, that would cover the person who can just book the facility and do basic operational kind of support. And then the artistic side would be, if we get the grant, would be the hybrid piece for year one. But we do want to make sure we have a long-term vision and not get that person stuck in operations and just just coordination for the center. Because then we'll never have the person who can make this center make money or, generate revenue, and real activity. So I guess that's what I'm nervous about, just our group being able to do successfully if we don't have some overseeing leadership.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think you're right. Thank you for that, Gail. You've laid out the steps in a way. So this is just about the first step, even for this committee to have something to look at, right? Even just taking what we've been talking about and putting it in a form and a piece of paper that we can read, or for someone who hasn't been at the meeting can read and look at it and going like, this is kind of what we need. This is where we're going. And I think that'll be really, really helpful, because it can go into a folder that there's some kind of continuity of figuring out what the next steps are. Because that's really clear in terms of the large multi-purpose use room and how it's going to function as an event place. It's going to be a really important key. However, there still needs the purview of the committee is the entire place. And there's still some sorting out to be done in that area. Because for those of us who are not working with the city, we have a tendency just to go, oh, well, I guess that's just city who's doing that. But I'm sure it's the purview of this committee how actually it's going to be done, right? I think it's one document. So there's another document, which is from the city's perspective, going, this is what we're able to provide. These are the gaps, right? That's all of it is useful. So it might even be a simple step of literally just reviewing some of the documentation that we've created, updating it, and being able to put it into a folder so that we all start looking at it. That could be a very simple step, right? Just because you've generated stuff like we've got it, and I go like, oh, okay. And even we all we know that, and then what needs to be added into it. Not that the subcommittee has to do all that. I'm saying we as a whole committee need to start looking at that. So, but I agree with you. We could have that as an action item, but we don't necessarily need to see it right at the next meeting, the one that's more complicated, right?
I think a draft is important. I think we could start working on based on that spreadsheet.
Yeah.
And have that hybrid job description with different color.
Yeah.
Depending on the hybrid or what they're responsible for. Pie in the sky ideas. It would be helpful. I think it's important we get to this.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is just like, and not worry, like just let's get it in a folder for ourselves, right? And then we can decide what the next steps are. Good.
Can I ask, if it's okay, just 2 concrete questions that would help with that endeavor once we are off on our own? One, would it be reasonable to assume that this hearth hire would be able to work up at the community center if if their job, especially in year one, is very operationally kind of like, is almost like the booking person. Would there be a space for this person to work up there? Because I think that's pretty critical to how we kind of vision this person.
Jillian, do you want to speak to that?
Or Liam, but I believe there'd be, one of the hot desk locations that would be available. So it wouldn't be a permanently assigned office,
Well,
for example, but
I also, I mean, I kind of thought that wouldn't there be somebody at the primary reception desk that would be there as like
yeah, that's the other spot. Yeah.
the booking reception. So let's say, imagine somebody walks in and they're like, hey, I would like to like rent the theater for like a big party and the community the lounge or the living room.
Let's say yes.
I think we can just, before going into the details of it, in your planning, at least, Jillian, you've been thinking about that, right?
We've been thinking, yes, there's not a whole lot of space, but yes.
So, but I think it's, so I think that's actually down the way a bit, but I think to answer your question, that's being considered and it's.
I mean, it's relevant because if this person's going to be doing such a sort of elemental job for just running the facility in the first year, then they kind of would need to be on, it'd be crazy for them to have to come up from the hearth every time it was a need.
No,
Okay.
you're absolutely right. They need to be there. I always envisioned to be there. And I think I hear you, Gail, saying the first year, but I don't envision the position like evaporating after the first year. Like the position's gonna need to carry on.
No, I actually kind of, what I meant, Liam, I'm sorry, is that we actually, at some point, we would want this person to not be a glorified kind of booking person. We really would eventually want them, we would need them to move into much more of that original vision that's written into the artistic programming director job description. If we want to position ourselves to get full-time real funding on an annual basis.
Right. So
Yeah.
maybe though, because that work that's required for the booking doesn't disappear. So what happens to that?
You've grown as a facility and then you have a part-time person or something doing the other thing. I mean, because I think that it would become too big. If you want this person to be generating
I think I'm
activity.
gonna just, this is all future planning. I think we've got our actions for what.
But that's what's so difficult is how are we going to do this if we don't, well, sure. Okay.
Because someone has to start somewhere, Gail, and it will eventually come back and it will get shaped and formed into something that will be able to be a decision that's made at council level and lead to something. But it's too many moving parts to try and we need something to, as Jamie suggested, something to put on the table that's concrete that we can chew on a bit and shape, right? To figure out, because I don't even know the process of how we're gonna make those decisions and who has to approve them. And I know you want that information, but we don't have that yet. At least it's not clear. And I just keep wanting to get to the policy document stuff because I think that actually is going to inform this discussion.
Do you think Gail had two questions?
Sure.
now?
No,
I think we should move on to these. Thank you.
Yeah, we're pretty behind, so.
yeah, no, I'm just wanting to get this here because I think we could spend the rest of the time figuring this one out and then table the policy documents, but they're important because that has to do with what has to be in place when we're ready to open. So over to introductions of the policy documents.
Well, not quite as exciting as artistic programming director, but policies, we do need policies to open the building, and part of our job in this community is to develop those policies. So a couple of weeks ago, Liam sent out a list of his thoughts on what we needed for policy. And we met later to go over what we think is needed for opening, and then what we think that the JMC / council will need to weigh in on. in particular. So a list was sent out. I'm not sure if everybody was able to see that, and there was some highlighted ones in particular, which are the ones for both for opening and require JMC approval. And so those are responsible use policy, which is unacceptable behavior, age restrictions, the rental policy, which is the biggest one, obviously, which is going to be the most encompassing of a lot of the work of the other subcommittees, an accessibility policy and a privacy policy. And then also later down the road, probably not for opening, but fundraising and environmental policy. So based on these, I've done some research personally and started looking into other places that use these sort of policies and have started building outlines on things. But I think, and jump in here, I think what I'm interested in hearing from is like where, at what point, or who wants to help from this committee build these, or whether it's, I come with what it is and it's an editing process from there, as opposed to building by committee. Anything else? That we...
Well, the timeline part.
Oh, yeah, the timeline. Yeah. So because of opening and, one of the things of it being pushed back, we do have a little bit more time, but the time, it takes a lot to get it to where it needs to be. And, with summer council being a little bit quieter in the summer, we want to have these things ready before everything happens. So, sorry, I'm blanking.
Well, no, just that.
I don't know the council process very well either.
Exactly.
Like I'm very new to this too, so I'm still also learning that.
So the three of us built this schedule based on multiple opportunities for things to go to council, including the opportunity for a council committee of the whole to really dive into it if council should feel that is a necessity. And like Liam said earlier, once you actually start plugging dates into everything, it's like, it's now. Actually, it was last week already, right?
Yeah, we're already, I'm like, already.
And we do have the benefit of a little bit more time, but as he was saying, council doesn't meet in August. So, we can't be counting on meetings there. So as we talk through it, so I've been really impressed with the work Lee has done so far on this policy development, by taking some from other places and adding different pieces in and talking it through. It feels like it's going to be more effective if Lee continues to work on it and brings it to a subcommittee who wants to look at that work as opposed to doing all that crafting together. I know you were giving people that opportunity to develop policy, which I know everyone's leaping at. But
I wasn't at the workshop thing, and so I don't know what the appetite is for people to actually get in and build policies. So I'm happy.
It just now that we've got that agenda item, it is really appropriate to what Gail was asking in a way, because just around the job description and what the hire is going to be at the heart, and then who is responsible for reading the policies, for making sure that the operations are in line with the policies, and who needs to approve all policies. And so I just see from the outside what I would call a mild culture clash, the culture of the municipality and how decisions are made and how operations work versus the culture of a not-for-profit arts organization who also has policies, but we work in a different way. We're managed by and responsible to a board of directors. And so there's a really clear understanding between what senior management does and what the board of directors do. But when we run into a city management model, we don't understand it as well, right? So I could say how I would approach the task of getting all these policies in place and approved. If I was looking at it from a not-for-profit arts organization model and seeing the city council as the board, who ultimately has responsibility, but that may not be applicable here.
I think there's really strong similarities between the two. There's just more opportunities for touch points because it has to go through committee and council as well. And it's just the timelines.
Yeah, exactly. So my sense is low-hanging fruit, which is stuff that is already out there, which you've done, Lee, which is fantastic, to take that, put it together. There's a certain element of trust in your judgment of going, this is not contentious, it's solid, it's clear, and it's easily implementable, doesn't necessarily need a lot of scrutiny. However, there will be some parts of some of these documents which are in a gray zone. They don't fit for a model that we have here, and you run up against a barrier, and then that's when this committee needs to help and look in and prepare that. So that's kind of the way I would look at it. You would be flagging things going, this needs to be looked at now because it's bringing up these issues. And I didn't want to be dismissive of you, Gail, about what you're trying to get at, but in a way, the policy, there needs to be some kind of a policy document around what we were discussing, even about the roles and responsibilities of the hearth and what that hearth hire would be versus how the rest of the place would be managed.
So is that a policy then, or is that
Exactly.
for the building? My thought was this was like for the building for the most part of it.
Yeah, it is. You're doing the large over thing, but then even those eyes on those policies or how it's going to be implemented. It's how they get used.
Mhm.
So some of them are just easy because they're health and safety, right? They're very basic.
Yeah.
But some of them are actually more, like I look on them and like they have a tendency to be reflect operations, right?
Mhm.
Right? And so my first initial reaction is done a really good job of prioritizing. These are the ones that are easy just to get the building open. Some of them, which may be more nuanced in the booking operational side, I'm hearing from Liam that that's not going to be happening starting like when you open on, let's say, July 19th. Is that someone going to be walking up to a desk wanting to book an event in that room? And so all the policies around that have to be like ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do.
They do, because you're July 19th, it's like 100% open booking for rooms, the whole 9 yards.
We're not gonna be open to the public on July 19th.
No.
No, so that's what I mean. So there's more time is what I'm saying. There's more time for some of those policies to get figured out.
Yes, but as Jillian said, the policies that require council approval need to ideally be done before August because council doesn't meet in August. So what we had mapped out in terms of the timeline was, could we be bringing a sort of suite of policy and decision required by council? So it's one package to council. Rather than piecemeal individual things. And if we were targeting July 8th, what are all the critical steps that would, like in an ideal process, look like? And when you map that out, it's, well, we need to be developing that first draft right now.
Right.
Um,
Now, may I ask a question? When you say the JMC approval required, when I saw that, I was kind of going, oh, we are like the representative of the council, but what you're saying, if it says JMC approved required, does that mean that it needs another step to go to council?
Yeah.
And so if it's JMC required, it automatically is council required?
There
no,
may be some elements.
close.
Yeah, there may be some elements that the JMC can provide blessing on, but it's pretty clear in the terms of reference that the council approves the policies of the operations of the facility. And so I think what we'll see happen over time with the JMC is that once the facility is up and running and there's a comfort level on council of how things are operating, there may be increased delegation of authority from council to the JMC.
Well, it's a bit like we hold the gun to the head of council because they've got so little time. Like, your tight timeline means that it's, there's not a lot of time for thought.
That's why,
Right?
that's when you look at this schedule, this is
Yeah,
an appropriate amount of time for council. And so
Right.
that's why council and the Hearth Board wanted to create the JMC. So you get the right people at the table doing the heavy thinking. And
right,
then council feels confident that what's coming to them has been really well thought through. But when
Right.
you look at, we can walk through this, basically, there's a back and forth through JMC for about a month, where JMC itself is looking at, okay, here's the policy, here's the draft, here's the second draft, and then, okay, JMC feels good with that. They then provide those materials to council, ideally at a committee of the whole, so that council gets it a week in advance of the committee of the whole. Council shows up at that committee of the whole. It's a real sort of roll your shirt sleeves up discussion, ask lots of questions, lots of back and forth. Council doesn't feel pressured to have to make a decision right then and there, but if they wish, they can make a recommendation to themselves to go forward. And then you can see it's another week, then it would, it was actually a 2-week period before it would then actually show up on a council approval date.
right.
And
You had your hand up, Judy?
Oh.
Sorry, Judy, did you have your hand up?
Well, I don't know that any of these policies are going to be necessarily very controversial. So I think that if this committee has thought it through and agreed with it and come up with arguments and counter arguments, and we can present it that way, that, you know, I don't even know that we need a committee of the whole, but some of this stuff. So I think that it's, you know, fairly straightforward. I think we need to be really clear on the timelines and give ourselves enough time. The committee of the whole is a whole other step. So I suppose it'd be good to have another open conversation about what's happening and get everybody up to date and have it a very public event. But you know, that's another level in terms of us having to be prepared and have everything ready. So if it just went as a package to council and, you know, took up a chunk of time in terms of your agenda planning, it's a decision from, I think, you and the mayor in terms of how much time you want to devote to it and whether or not you want to use up one of the COWs. So
Exactly. And Councillor Getty, you're absolutely right. What we did is, and I always do this, is build out like, well, what does an ideal schedule look like with lots of time for everybody's consideration? And there's opportunity to condense this and move this faster if needed.
There's going to be a great deal more conversation about whatever the terms of reference are going to be between the agreement between the Hearth and council and whether or not there's any money involved.
Yeah.
That's the harder discussion.
Yeah.
This stuff should be rubber stamped.
Yeah.
So if we want to put this in as a package, we might be holding this up in terms of a much more difficult conversation about whatever the terms of reference might be and of the some sort of co-management idea. And if there's an ask in terms of funding. So if this is important that we get it up and ready and rubber stamped and agreed to by council before it opens, not that the others aren't, but that this is something that should just go sliding right through.
Yeah, thank you for that.
That's last
Judy.
word, but you know.
The only one that I think Lee might need a little bit, because it could tie into it, is the rentals policy outline, because rentals policy is going to encompass a lot of the discussion of it. So that's the one I would pull out and say that's the one that we need to look at. But the rest, I agree with Judy on our kind of like full operational stuff. And it's actually, to be honest, outside the expertise and of what you've put the joint management committee together. We're like community representatives who have an interest and focus in it and may not have a lot of it. You probably have more experience in that than we do. or at least you've been in the position to know, be the one who has more experience in it, right? My initial reaction with hearing Judy would be to actually just pull the rentals one out. And I see that one, it's got a yes that it needs to be there on the first day, you said, Leah, but I see that's actually the challenge. Because of some of the stuff we were discussing earlier about the arrangement between the hearth and the municipality and who's gonna be, what that position is and how that's gonna be managed is going to have an impact on things like rental policies, because you know, that you're gonna want one thing that encompasses the whole thing, right, as a policy. And if you've got somebody from the hearth who's acting in a management model, they're gonna be acting underneath those policies, right? So that has to be looked at by this committee, how that works.
Sure, but there is stuff within that rental policy we can just bang out really quickly. Use the cafe and the kitchen, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, you know, there will be stuff in there, but I mean, just as a group, I don't
We
know.
should get going on it ultimately.
Yeah.
Or-
It happened.
Or at the end of the day, like, so I don't see any like links that open up to anything that you've got on here, but at the end of the day, you're looking for help on this. People to join in on a subcommittee, ultimately to help draft or go pick and choose stuff from other organizations, make it our own.
I think it's, instead of coming to everybody with every little thing.
Yeah.
I think it's worth spending the time with just a few people.
Yeah.
And like, I've already started a lot of these anyways, so.
I'll throw my hat in the ring.
Thank you.
If you want.
Okay.
It was suggested to the Mission and Core Values Subcommittee and they just went, oh, no. So it's not gonna be delegated to them, to us as a group, I don't think, but I'd be willing to help as well.
Okay.
Okay, and so that's a new subcommittee,
There you go.
right? Good, so that's an action, a new subcommittee's been created. Policy review, and it's Lee and Fraser.
And Judy.
No, she said no, she went, oh.
no.
That was, you're being facetious.
No.
No.
That was you and Gail
Oh.
and Mimi and.
Fraser.
And Judy, okay.
But knowing our
good.
timelines,
Thank you.
let's,
Good, thank you, so do you have the action on that?
No, I've got a policy review subcommittee.
It has been struck, right?
Yeah.
And it's got Judy and Fraser and Lee on it.
Mhm.
And their action is to review, and if they, I don't want to put this in
May
the
7th.
action, bring it back, rubber stamp. So
Maybe
that
we should
this
do
committee can
earlier now
rubber
that
stamp
we're at
it.
this timeline, you know,
Yeah.
that was not knowing about.
so amongst the three of us, let's set a date outside of this and we'll.
Yeah,
And I think I'm probably on subcommittees.
I think you've been working on them anyway.
No, Lee's
Just
working
down
on
the
them.
hall anyway,
Yeah.
so I have to come over.
Very good, thank you for your work.
and
Good, thank you. We know thank you, Liam, for laying that out. And Lee, of course, and Jillian, thank you for doing that, taking the initiative to get that, so we stay on track. Now it's the job description. Now we can come back, Gail, like in terms of, we don't have a lot of time left, but in terms of the next steps for this, I think you nicely laid out very clearly what needs to happen from the not-for-profit arts side of things as seeking public funding for this position, the things that need to be in place and the thoughts that need to go in it. What I'm hearing is that the process about how we make that concrete and find the buy-in, or I wouldn't use the word buy-in, but with the municipality and how we actually make that happen. Do you know what I mean? Like, get it down in writing and in a form of a way that it's going to go to council to agree to this model. That's what I'm a little unclear on. I think I always come up against that going, don't understand city process enough to know like how that's going to work. And that's why I think it becomes challenging. Is there anything that we want to put in place at this meeting that's going to lead us forward in that direction, right?
I just feel like it's still so much in the draft.
Yeah.
It's not ready to go to council.
No, it isn't, but what are the steps? Like, what do we need? What do we need to figure out?
Well, like I said, that, we'll take this as the draft and we'll start adding in the other sort of elements from that spreadsheet.
Yeah,
And like Gail says, had like the first year, second.
Yeah,
year, and
that
beyond.
stuff.
Like it just is gonna be a document that
Yeah.
with a lot of.
That's okay. Maybe the other way at it is the money side. Because that's all about what we're gonna get them to
We're
do.
not guaranteed money.
No, no,
We
you're
don't get
not,
that grant,
but I thought what was thought of is, so just like we run our organization. So some of the money, you're applying for a grant and you may or may not get it, right? Some of the money, you need to generate through revenue. So you set a benchmark.
But the first year, we probably won't generate.
No, exactly. So, and then the third part is the concrete part, which is what the municipality is gonna put in, right? And that's what you were referring to,
How to
Judy.
persuade them.
And how to persuade them to commit that money would be when I would go, that's the step in relationship to figuring out that process is going, okay, so what do we need to have in place so that council can be voting or deciding, like there's a number. Like, that's nice to have all that, but what's the number, right? So we come at it from that way. And if we can get that commitment to that number, then other things are easier to figure out. Right, because we have a concrete number from the endowment. Now we probably need a concrete number from the municipality. And then the other two parts, which we can't know, are going to be revenue generation in the future and also whether there's outside granting. But maybe we need to focus in on trying to figure out that number, right?
I wrote the same thing down. I agree with you. We'll put, putting forward a budget as a top priority.
Yeah.
And how the next, I just, if it's okay, I just want to say that 7.2 upcoming grant opportunity.
Hey guys, parking lot party. Sorry. Oh my God, that's the second time it's happened to you today.
Oh, that's okay. With BCAC, I just want to say there was a second grant that just needed to be referenced here. I won't talk about for long. It's not due until November 15th.
Oh.
Lee has already been asked to sit on a subcommittee of the Performing Arts Committee of the Hearth Board, and it's for $250,000 from the BC Arts Council Infrastructure Grant for capital improvements.
Right.
And if we can get, what we're trying to do is put together a list that Lee is really helping to generate that will find ways that the Hearth can use our nonprofit status to support the municipality to obtain materials needed for to make the theater, the Bowen Theater operational.
Right.
From AV equipment to maybe support for storage for AV, because we know that. So Lee is really helping to put that list together. And basically what we're doing is I would almost argue, loaning to you our nonprofit status to help generate as much as hopefully $250,000 towards the community center's Bowen Theater.
Right. Thank you, Gail. And in fact, as you talk, I see that is exactly the beginning of the relationship of this position the hire is looking for.
Exactly.
You're acting in that role already and you're defining the relationship, right? And how the process is going to work. Oh, is that Liam with his hand up again? Yes, go ahead, Liam.
Thank you, Kim. Gail, is that the same grant program that we applied for last year for $250,000 for equipment? For that same
The
space?
retractable seating?
No, not retractable seating. We applied for a whole bunch of AV equipment and such.
Infrastructure.
I think they're different. I think the Cultural Spaces grant was the larger one. And it was an BC Arts Council infrastructure program grant that we got the 40,000 for the seats. But the larger one that Cultural Spaces is Heritage.
Cultural Spaces Canada is Heritage.
Heritage. That's the large one that we were not successful.
Oh, but there was a second one.
We identified just the seating as what we could apply for within that because timelines of construction, I can't remember all of it off the top.
Okay.
I think that is the same program. There was some reason why we did the smaller on that.
Anyway, that's good for that update. And I think it does help me again understand the process that we need to put on paper that we can put to council with a number on it. And again, it's like, because we're opening soon, I think we can make a compelling argument to council about why that investment needs to be made concrete sooner than later, like, like one of the first actions, so that the committee can actually so it can start functioning, right? Because part of it is, who's gonna do the work? And if it's all being done by a volunteer committee, then it's not gonna happen, right? And it's, again, it's that uneasy balance of you work for the city, so you're here, but we don't know how much of what you're doing is volunteer outside of what your purview time is, like we are, and how much is your job, right? And so it's not as clear on either side. Do you know what I'm getting at? So we're here as volunteers. We're trying to work out what the arts can contribute towards the functioning of the operation of the place. But we keep assuming that you're city staff and that you're going to be doing this, or we have guarding against that. So we still haven't figured out that model. And so the municipality is going to have to, we need to come with a proposal to the municipality about a certain amount of resource that needs to be committed actually for when the thing is up and running. If it's in addition to what's already there, I mean, operational commitment, because they've hired Lee, right? And so we're kind of identifying something else. Is that right? Oh,
Sounds like there's another group.
who's coming in here? Sorry, it's parking lot party.
7 o'clock meeting in.
Oh, okay, sorry. Any last comments before I call it to an adjournment? We're all clear on this? Thank you, Liam. Thank you, everybody. I'm kind of clear. A whole crap of work that needs to be done in a short period of time.
We need stuff.
Thanks, everybody. Oh,
Off the
You were still live?
screen, so
we're still live. Okay.
nobody say their SIN number or anything like that.
Okay. Can I push a button?
Okay.
You just closed the Zoom meeting.
To adjourn? Yeah.
Yes, adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Thank you.
Careful. Might want to keep it open for the next meeting.
Jillian's just going to get her, so.
Thank you. I didn't turn it off. I just heard her say parking lot party and then.
Now there's people waiting outside for us to finish up, so.
But that there was a special party being thrown in the parking lot for us that we had to
People
go.
always book council chambers for birthday parties, right?
Oh. She said parking lot party.
All right.
I didn't touch it. Help them. I was gonna turn it off.